Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Welcome, everybody. Today's Big Blend Radio Toast of the Art Show features artist Victoria Chick, who's joining us to talk about three 20th century printmakers who made flowers and plants their subjects, even in black and white. It's really quite interesting. As you know, Victoria is a contemporary figurative artist, and she's also an early 20th century print collector, and she's based out in beautiful Silver City, New Mexico, a wonderful art community and art destination. You can read her articles with us and listen to her past interviews. Just go to blendradioandtv.com. You'll also see her article there about flowers and plants being the subject of these three artists, and also on nationalparktraveling.com and in Parks and Travel magazine. And, of course, go visit her website and look at her art. It is victoriachick.com. So welcome back, Vicki. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Very glad to be here, as a matter of fact, and talking to you again.
Yeah, you too. I know you've had some interesting times since we last talked. So it's been interesting times, interesting weather. How is Silver City? Because I know that here it's been raining, but now it's sunny. We're here in 29 Palms, the oasis of murals, just outside Joshua Tree today. So, yeah, have you had the same weather?
We are having similar weather, and the sun is shining today. It's been raining a lot, and for those of us who live in the Southwest, we are so happy about that. We need the moisture, and when we get it, it's cause for celebration in a lot of ways.
And your area is kind of high desert. It's interesting because you go from that, kind of like the Chiricahua area up into the high desert, and then you've got the wilderness area, the Gila Wilderness area, the Gila National Forest. So you've got the pines, and you've got quite an interesting, topography.
Well, it is. We live here at 6,300 feet. Silver City is 3 miles away at 5,900 feet. And it's very hilly, and then just maybe like 6 or 7 miles north of us, we have some mountains that are 10,000 feet, even close to 11,000 feet. So the topography is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is. And spring wildflowers, does that happen for you? It
does. It's too early right now because at our elevation it's cooler here than it is on the low desert.
We're getting a few here in Joshua Tree area, and I expect Nancy and I we're hoping to get out there and get hiking more in Joshua Tree National Park, and get some wildflower footage. And it's been a while, Nancy, since we've been up here.
I know, and it's starting to warm up, so I know the little flowers are already poking their little heads up.
All the cactus have buds, so it's an exciting time. The creosote's happy, so it's flower power season, everybody. But this is interesting. You talking about these three printmakers. So you've got Carl-Grupp, if I'm saying his name. Yes. This is always fun to see if I can pronounce all these artist names that you always talk about. And you've got Wilbur-Niewald, and then also Victoria-Hutson-Huntley. I know we've chatted about her before. So what's interesting is all of them tend to do the pictures of the flowers in black and white.
Well, they do. And I find it really interesting because they're dealing with subjects that are generally bright colored, and they're doing them in black and white, and that might seem strange. Although if you're an artist, it's not so strange because what artists will do oftentimes, especially if they're painters, is they will see things in what we call tones. So they're trying to develop a composition based on light and dark, so that you have a sensation when you look at it that things are not just flat; they're rounded, that they have dimension. And so you have to think in terms of light and dark for that, and that's called modeling. And that's why, in fact, it's a technique that students learn first. One of the first things when they go to art school.
Okay, so Nancy, you used to do. I remember you doing, pictures of plants. Remember that big, I know we've touched on this before.
Yeah, that experimental flower painting where I had probably 3 dozen different kinds of flowers all in one picture, and I did it all in burnt umber and ultramarine blue, which kind of makes it almost a black, in tones of that, and then waited for it to dry, and then glazed over all the different colors that the flowers actually were, to see if that was an interesting experiment. Well,
it's a fantastic technique. Yeah, I'm glad. And the light and dark when you're glazing, and then the light and dark shines through. It's semi-transparent. So it's a really wonderful technique, and it's one that the old masters developed in Northern Europe.
Yes,
they did that especially well.
It lets the light come through the paint instead of having like an opaque kind of paint. So it was a weird process, and I liked it, but I found it a little bit. I think I'm a little too impatient because I had to keep going back and reglazing to build it up the way the masters would build it up. But I could see that the dimensions came from the several layers of paint that was not opaque.
Yeah, some of those people that were painting in the 15th century and using that technique, they would have like 20 layers of glaze on there, and that's between the glazing and the drying and the glazing again, it's very time consuming. As you know.
It was, So that's why I called it an experiment, because I did it, and I'm glad I did it, and I learned a lot, but I don't want to do it that way again.
Right. You moved on.
Yes. What's interesting, too, with these 3 artists, they're doing drawings, and you were talking about Carl-Grupp, he's just doing drawing, and more drawing, and they're doing, like, all these different shades, but it's almost like you were talking about how you really you don't need the color to know it's being represented. And I think it's kind of interesting, even with black and white photography. It's a different emotion, and it's a different, it's a different experience for the viewer of the art when you look at it.
It creates a different mood, that's for sure.
I think you can see the form better. When I'm looking at the photos that you sent of the paintings, the stems of the flowers are more important almost than the actual flower. Because you see, it just seems like to me the stems and the leaves became more prominent than that. You know what I mean? They kind of like, one of them looks all kind of like I want to say it looks like a Venus flytrap plant, but it's not. But it's got those like tangled like stems coming up, and it's kind of. I think if it was in color, you wouldn't notice that as much.
Yeah. Yeah,
you're probably right. I hadn't thought of that. But when people do flowers, when people look at flowers, they're more apt to look at the flower than at the stem that holds it up, or the leaves that grow off the stem. So I think that maybe that's human nature to look at what they think is the most interesting thing. But unless you've got the stems right, the flowers aren't going to go look right either. So they support the flowers, so they are important.
It's kind of interesting now in spring. Being up in the high desert, there's all these plants that look dead, like creosote looks dead until then the water comes. And I mean, within 24 hours, it's got growth. It's like, what? This plant you thought was dead is here. It's alive. And it's a very interesting time to really take a look at plants and what happens with them on the biology side. I think it's really fascinating. There's these plants out here, and I think it's, I'm going to say related to the unicorn, the desert unicorn, but I'm going to be wrong.
The unicorn?
No, the desert unicorn, yes. Well, that it does make the devil's claw when it dries out. Anyway, there's these weird stalks, and we call them alien plants. So we create our own plant names, but they kind of remind me of Victoria-Huntley's picture because there's these weird stalks with these weird like bubbles on the. Anyway, They're weird plants, but they're coming to life because they're sticks, and they're really, to me, architecturally interesting to photograph as, dry. And now they're starting to get green leaves, and then the stems are starting to purple up. And there's going to be yellow flowers soon, but it's just this very interesting thing, and that's what's great about what their art is doing. It's kind of it goes with spring, and for me, because of the architectural
well, you're
part
right.
of plants. I'm weird, I know.
The one thing about those plants is that most, when they're in full leaf and full flower, their structure is hidden. And so when you have the opportunity in spring, like you're talking about, to see like the growth pattern of the whole thing, it is very interesting. It's like looking at bones.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you're right. See, well, now that goes into Georgia O'Keeffe, right? She was into bones.
Yeah.
And everybody thought, her flowers were all, the feminine side of things. Hello. And but it wasn't. Yeah. She was into the form as well, but she was also really into bones. We went to her museum in Santa Fe, and it was just really interesting to see these different things that she was doing, and how people didn't expect her to be female in doing all of this either, And she's like, yes, I can do this as a woman. I didn't have to do it. It was amazing. But her flowers, a lot of them just, it showed all the form and the color, but then, going to the bone thing, she liked doing skeletons and all that stuff. So that was interesting, that connection there. Do you paint flowers ever? Do you get into that?
Well, I haven't focused on them in quite a while, but when I moved here, there were plants and flowers that were entirely new to me, and so I really paid a lot more attention to them. Like, for instance, when I lived in California, there were datura plants there, but here there are many, many more than there were in the area where I lived in California, and I was able to study them because a lot of them are on our property. And certain kinds of wildflowers that grow here, like prickly poppy, were not available to see where other places I've lived. So I did study them, and I really enjoyed close-up study of them and painting a close-up rendering of them. I was kind of careful because it was almost scientific for me, except that I'm a sort of a painterly person, so I wasn't terribly detailed, but I was trying to capture what I thought was important about them, and it was really fun.
Well, Victoria-Hutson-Huntley, what's interesting about her, I didn't know that she was doing work on the Everglades, because the Everglades, to me, when it comes to botany, is really fascinating. You've got the river of grass, what they call, out in the swampy lands and everything. And then you've got the mangrove swamps, you've got the mangrove side, and then you've got all these orchids and swamp flowers, and to me, what was really exciting. And you've got a hardwood forest. So it's all these tropicals and all these different microclimates when we were there. But they've got bromeliads, and that tripped me out, to see bromeliads in the wild. Because you're so used to seeing it at, Home Depot or whatever. But to see them, just thrive like that, these air plants, it's like, dude, that's trippy cool. Because that's bizarre, how they do that.
Aren't bromeliads a South African flower too?
Oh, I think they.
Or am I thinking of a different?
Well, I think they're related to a pineapple, as I recall.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think they are more. I'm looking it up now. They're tropical in Americas and West Africa. Yeah, so the American subtropics and West Africa. Nancy, we didn't see them in Kenya, did we?
No.
No.
I think Kenya was far too dry most of the time.
And they are related to the pineapple. They are of the pineapple family.
Yes.
We grew pineapples. We grew pineapples in South Africa.
Of something that's similar. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but so she did those scientific drawings, and I bet you that helps even, showcase the biodiversity, of the Everglades. I wonder if she knew Marjorie Stone. I wonder if she knew her. You know,
one thing I thought that was interesting about all three of these is when I picked them out. Of course, I was looking through my own collection, but I was picking them up because of the images. But when I went back and reread my biographical material, I realized all three of these artists were also teachers.
Oh.
And I don't know that that's important for this topic necessarily, but I think people who like to study, who are truly interested in what they're doing, often have a tendency to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, they actually, that was mostly their livelihood. But I thought Artist-Carl-Grupp was especially interesting because when he was young, he was a terrible student, and people despaired of him ever graduating from anything. And somehow he got involved in art, and he had an art teacher that was really, really encouraging and suggested that he go on and study more. And he was so thrilled to think that anybody was paying attention to him. He did go on and study more, and he wound up being the head of the art department in the same school that he had gone to, where the teacher had told him he really ought to continue on and study. So I think so much. Teachers are so important. All it takes is one teacher, one time, to make a difference in somebody's life.
I think it's the other part of that is what's interesting is how their art and doing the black and white side of this and being like, hey, take a look at it's art, but it's still of that scientific biological approach. So even with their art, they're being teachers, with these plants.
Yeah.
That's an interesting part of
Niewald, you guys know that I spent a lot of my growing up time, and even later on in the Kansas City area, and so I knew of Wilbur-Niewald. I never had him for a teacher because I went to a different school, but he was sort of like the grand old man of painting, and people really respected him. And he would go out into the park or on a hill overlooking one of the boulevards usually, and he worked like he kind of worked like Cézanne, because he spent a lot of time looking and observing, and he could go out there for hours and hardly ever actually move his paintbrush because he was studying what it was he wanted to paint before he made a move to paint on the canvas. So he was interesting also to me.
These are all. I always like it when you group artists together because you always find this connection, but then they're not. You know what I mean? They still have their.
Everybody has a different technique. And his was unique to me at the time because I had never watched anybody paint like that before. But but now that I am older myself, I realize that 90% of doing a painting is deciding what you're going to paint, and the other 10% is doing it. But thinking about what you're going to do first is really important. Otherwise, you're just sort of moving the paint around, and sometimes it'll work, and then sometimes it won't. So
the happy accidents.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point though. When you I drive Nancy nuts because I'll have like a really good like feature story idea or this and that, and then like not even a minute later, but we could do it this way instead, and then I'll go, no, okay, we're doing it this way, and then 10 minutes later, what about this? So does that happen when you're creating a painting? That it's like you start to you argue with yourself.
And sometimes you do a painting, and then even if it's a pretty good painting or drawing, while you're doing it, think I could do this a slightly different way, and then do that in that different way in the next painting. So you might wind up with a series of paintings that are related, but each composition is a little bit different. The way you look at it changes, and so that's a very interesting process.
I think it's like this 3-day thing. At least for me, it was like I do a painting, I'm very happy while I'm doing it, or I get really frustrated if it's not doing what I want it to do. But then once you finish a painting, and leave it for 3 days, when you look at it, then you either really like it or you really don't.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot of that that goes on. Or you do a painting and you think this is done, and you set it aside, and then a year later you look at it and you think, I need to change some things on this, and so that's pretty common too.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on with Carl-Grupp is that he founded an art museum, so you have something in connection with him. Did you dig into what he did with that? With everything that's going on in Silver City, New Mexico. I know you're working on this project of bringing a fine art museum into town, which is an amazing. I think it's going to be so great for Silver City, because it is such a thriving and bustling art community. To have a museum just takes it to a whole other level, So I think it's awesome. But did you dig into his past of that?
I think it's really important. I think towns that have art museums are blessed in so many different ways. I mean, the more people come to the town, yes, and it helps the economy, yes. But beyond that, you've got, or more important than that, I think, is the richness of people's lives becomes greater, and seeing art expands people's horizons. Sometimes people get inspired, especially young people. They get inspired to become artists, but people can see that even like if you have a show and the theme show, and there's one subject, like let's just say flowers, that we're talking about that, you can see how many different ways people interpret a subject, and that there's no one way to do it, and that's important in life in general, in problem solving, because art and doing art and understanding how artists work can carry over into every single kind of subject, and make every subject more creative in finding different ways to solve problems, and not being afraid to change.
And I think it inspires people to try it themselves. It's like, maybe I could do that. That one artist we met in South Africa, that she did paintings of fairies and flowers, and she had like her paintbrush was 1 or 2 hairs, and she painted 1/4 inch of the painting at a time, and each 1/4 inch was like its own little painting, but when you step back, it was one big painting by the time she was done. So her method was really, really strange to me, but I always wanted to try it. But then there's a patience to it of how far ahead do you think to do these millions of little paintings all on one canvas, and it turns into one big canvas. That forethought of, it's like I found it like, okay, I want to go and play with the brush and swing the color around. That minute 1 hair at a time thing. I'm like, okay, that's not me.
Wow.
Well, but that's the wonderful thing about being able to be expressive and creative and find your own way. Within the parameters of what makes a good design. What all the elements of art are, and once you understand those and you adopt 2 or 3 different approaches within one painting, you can't do everything, but so that your painting has expresses what you're trying to say, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And some people come by that naturally, but not very many. And but I think the interesting thing about art in general is that we look at, there are only so many ways to design,
Mm-hmm.
so many categories of design, and so many elements of art. But when you look at it historically, you could look at art from every single century, every single even 1,000-year or 2,000-year-old art. You understand it, you appreciate it, because it's using the same elements that you're
Mm-hmm.
using today.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting them together differently, but they're there. Like repetition, for example, or line. You know, what is being emphasized by a particular culture or a particular artist. It always blows my mind when I realize that the principles are the same, and and they're put together by different people in so many different ways.
Exactly.
I think it's. I always think that nature is an inspiration, you know, because you see, going back to like the plants and the architecture of a plant. To me, it's fascinating because we use, you know, design. You know, you look at how a palm frond is and how we use those, you know, things like that to create fans. You know what I mean? And then people start painting on fans, and how this whole thing, you know, I think we use nature a lot for inspiration, and a lot of times we don't realize it. And even just for functional things, you know.
Yes,
we will just
and in a lot of ways, if you took color is inspired by nature, and if you look at the color relationships, even within one flower, you can relate it in a scientific way or an artistic way to what people have reduced it to, as far as like the color wheel, for instance. All that is derived from nature.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Observation and what colors work well together. It's a fascinating study.
I geek out on that kind of stuff because there's just so many different viewpoints. I geek out on, like, okay, there's this. Like, I'll just look at how the lines in a plant leaf are, and I don't know. It's the color, to me, that is, you know, you look at, wow, how's this happen here? And, you know, you look at a piece of scenery. I think that's what's got to be such a draw for landscape artists, whether it's photography or painting or sketching, and is that it's interesting watching how the color merges together. So it's like Mother Nature knows, like, this is what it's going to look like. This is your palette. You know what I mean? It's so cool to look at. And I want to say, you know, Victoria, you send us on our Love Your Parks tours. We travel across the country documenting parks. We're up to over 180 park units that we've now covered. We have a whole map of every single park we've been to. You've got Silver City's Big Ditch is in there, by the way. The Big Ditch is in there. Well, no, that's a really cool story. A really cool story about engineering and a woman engineer who helped the Big Ditch, you know, in regards to the runoff from flooding and all that. But we're also doing all this public art and a public art map for you, and it's really amazing to me how much art is in public spaces, especially where we are here in 29 Palms. It's the oasis of murals. Everywhere you turn, there's a mural. And there's, you know, little parks. They even created a park outside the visitor center on the main road with kinetic sculptures and murals and places to sit and have a picnic. It's pretty wild, but it really, I was thinking about it driving through town, it really makes a town. You know, it's like an outdoor museum, like, you know, the importance of a museum. I think public art is your first step almost, in a way, to getting a community involved in the arts and to appreciate it. You know?
Yes, I've been. You know, I used to go through 29 Palms, and it was probably when they were starting their mural program, and it was impressive even then. And I think you're right about a town is known really as, or people come back to a town, they return to town, or they remember a town because of what's there. And art is a big part of that. It's a big draw. People enjoy it. People benefit from it. It's really important. And I'm sure that 29 Palms now has, even, way more than I saw when I was last through there.
It's pretty huge. You have sculptures
and a lot of towns
everywhere.
are doing murals because they are enjoyable. People in the town like them. The ones in Silver City reflect the history of the town, or the flora and fauna of the town, and the things that have happened here historically, and the kids do them under adult supervision. So that is that's the one thing, that each town is unique as to how they choose what they're doing and who's going to do it. Having the kids do it here is what makes the murals in Silver City unique.
I know. I love that. I love the kids. There's a lot of places doing it. Marana, just outside Tucson. It's just really it's west of Tucson and near Oro Valley.
Yeah.
And their school kids are working with this one metal artist, and they're learning welding out of it. And it's, to me, this is an amazing project. And they're doing things that are native to the desert, so deer and anything that's historical. So they're learning the history of their community. They're learning the flora and fauna of their community by doing it. So it's this whole project. I had no idea what you sent us on, like how much we'd learn, and how you look at its community in a different way. I always appreciated it, but I didn't appreciate the public art on the level that I do now. So I just wanted to say thanks for sending us on this great journey, because we're finding all kinds of things and looking.
Well, I bet you're gonna find more too, because this concept that seems to be catching on fire nationwide, and so many cities are getting involved, and I think it's wonderful. And the more people that can be involved in public art, and the more people that then come out and enjoy public art, makes it all worthwhile.
Oh, it's true.
Well, it makes it way more fun to stroll around the city.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, and I think it's very welcoming.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It is. It's really true. Well, Victoria, as always, thank you for joining us. Everyone, Victoria's article on the three artists, it's up on blendradioandtv.com, also in the spring-summer issue of Big Blend Radio and TV magazine. Of course, keep up with Victoria at victoriachick.com. You can see our public art map and story project for Victoria at nationalparktraveling.com. You'll see our Love Your Parks tour section of the website and a link to all our interactive story maps, and it's something that we're just going to keep doing because it's so cool, and we're going to be doing some more stories here on Joshua Tree and 29 Palms on the public art here. Also, we love to play music for our guests and obviously for our listeners, you guys. Thank you for joining us. Today's song, you were talking about Datura, Victoria, and to me, Datura is like a giant morning glory, big tubular morning glory, and they're like moonflowers because they do bloom at night. But this song is, so it kind of goes with it, but I wanted to play this. It's called What's Your Story, Morning Glory, and it's by Carmen Lundy, who's also a painter, amazing jazz vocalist, composer, painter, artist, all around. It's just creativity, on every level. She does it. And so everyone, you can keep up with Carmen. It's carmenlundy.com. And this is from her album Soul to Soul. So here it is. What's Your Story? Morning Glory. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Thanks, Victoria.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you. Always great to talk to you.
You take care.
Thank you.
What's your story, morning glory? What makes you look so blue? The way that you've been acting, I don't know what to do, for I love you. Sure as 1 and 1 makes 2. What's your story, morning glory? Got a feeling there's a lot you're concealing. Oh, won't you let me know your point of view? What's your story, morning glory? You've got me worried too. The postman came this morning and left a note for you. Did you read it? Then you know that I love you. What's your story, morning glory? Give an answer to this patient romantic. Oh, won't you tell me that you love me too? What's your story, morning glory? You've got me worried too. The postman came this morning and left a note for you. Did you read it? Then you know that I love you. What's your story, morning glory? Give an answer to this patient romantic. Oh, won't you tell me that you love